That morning, Nenna began to pack her box. After she was done packing, she took a bath, got dressed and carried her bag to leave. But as she was about to step out, Olabisi appeared in front of her and delivered a heavy blow to her head. Immediately, Nenna stumbled, fell to the ground and passed out. Olabisi became very scared and thought to himself, "Have I killed Nenna? What if she's dead?" Suddenly, he heard a loud bang on the door. He became confused and didn't know what to do. He peeped through the door hole and saw Nenna's parents knocking, and he became more scared. A shockwave ran through his spine. Earlier that morning, Nenna had sent the maid on an errand because she didn't want the maid to see her leave or know her whereabouts. As a result, there was no one at home to open the door. Olabisi quickly carried Nenna into their room and left her on the floor. Then he picked up a duvet to cover her. But as he was about to cover her, he noticed blood coming out of Nenna's nose, and this made him even more shocked and scared. He began to sweat profusely. The loud bang on the door grew more intense as Nenna's parents knocked aggressively. Mr. Olabisi, feeling confused, quickly entered the bathroom, poured water on himself, and wore only a pair of boxers to make it seem like he just finished taking a bath. Then he went to open the door. He found Nenna's parents standing there looking both angry and curious. "Where is our daughter? Where is Nenna?" her mother asked. "We want to see her. We have something urgent to discuss with her. We've been trying to call her, but her phone is switched off." "Oh, probably her phone's battery is low," Olabisi replied nervously. "You know, she hardly charges her phone unless I do it for her." "So where is our daughter? We need to speak with her, please," Nenna's father questioned. Olabisi stammered. Oh, well, she left home this morning. She said she was going to see her friend, but she hasn't returned yet." His voice trembled with fear. Nenna's parents suspected something was wrong. Olabisi's responses didn't seem confident, and his body language was unusual. "So why did you take long to open the door for us? We've been knocking for some time," Nenna's father asked curiously. "Well, as you can see, my body is still wet," Olabisi said, pointing to himself. "I just came out of the bedroom. I was taking a shower when I heard the loud banging on the door." "What about the housemates? Why didn't they open the door?" Nenna's mother asked. "Unfortunately, I sacked them," Olabisi lied, trying to cover up. "I'm waiting to employ a new house help from the agency. As you can see, my body is still wet. I need to finish what I was doing. I have a meeting to attend in an hour and I'm already late. Please permit me to leave now. When my wife comes back, I'll tell her to call you," Olabisi said in a haste. Then he dismissed Nenna's parents and shut the door behind them. Nenna's parents left feeling suspicious. "Are you sure Olabisi is okay? He's behaving so strange today. That's not his usual way of talking. He did not even allow us into the sitting room," Nenna's father complained. "Well, let's wait until Nenna is back. I just hope my daughter is safe wherever she is." As soon as Olabisi returned to his room, he shut the door behind him and found Nenna still lying unconscious on the ground. He was terrified and didn't know what to do next. Shaking with panic, he knelt beside her and shook her vigorously, trying to wake her up, but Nenna remained unresponsive. For a moment, Olabisi was completely confused and nearly broke down in tears. Then a thought struck him. He rushed into the bathroom and came back with a bucket of water. He sprinkled some water on Nenna's face, and suddenly she regained consciousness. Nenna sat up quickly as soon as she saw Olabisi. Her eyes were wide with fear as she looked at Olabisi. She was in shock and began to scream in panic. "Help me! Somebody help me! My husband is a murderer!" she cried out. Without thinking, Olabisi grabbed her and covered her mouth with his hand to muffle her screams. He saw a singlet on the floor. He tore it into strips and forced some pieces into Nenna's mouth to silence her. Then he rushed into his wardrobe, grabbed a strong rope and used it to tie Nenna up. I don't want to hear any shouting from you again. If I hear you scream, I will kill you right here and nobody will ever know. So be a good girl and behave. Out of fear, Nena complied. She was confused and couldn't understand what was happening. How did Olabisi manage to get hold of her? All she remembered was trying to sneak out of the house. How she had ended up lying on the ground inside their room. None of it made sense to her. She felt a sharp pain on her head and realized that she must have been knocked out by Olabisi. Fear consumed her as she struggled to free herself from the rope tied round her body. As she wriggled and fought against the restraints, the rope dug deeper into her skin, leaving painful cuts. When she realized that her struggles were pointless, she stopped with tears streaming down her face as panic set in. Meanwhile, Olabisi stepped out into the compound to his staff quarters and called out, "Mrs. Une? Une? Where are you? Come here now." Mrs. Une was a 65-year-old woman who had been working for Olabisi for a long time, even before he got married to Mary. She was a loyal and hardworking domestic staff, and she had been the one taking care of Prince Will. She ran out to meet Olabisi in the compound when she heard her name. "Mrs. Une, I have an urgent issue to attend to, and I need to leave immediately. I'll be away for a very long time and I won't be staying at the house. I need to lock up the place and travel right now. For that reason, I won't be needing your services while I'm away. But don't worry, I'll always pay you every month and even in my absence. Here, take this money and leave immediately. I'll call you once I'm back to resume your work," Olabisi said, handing Mrs. Une a large sum of money. Mrs. Une was surprised. In the 20 years she had worked for Olabisi, she had never seen him so urgent and agitated. Out of curiosity, she asked, "Sir, is everything okay?" "Don't bother," Olabisi replied sharply. "Just go. Go now." "But sir, what about Prince Will? He's still sleeping. Who will take care of him when he wakes up while I'm away?" "Don't worry about that. I will handle the rest," Olabisi said with a firm voice. Mrs. Une, though confused and concerned, went to her room, packed her bags and left the compound. As soon as she was gone, Olabisi locked the gate, went back into the house and checked on Nena, who was still tied up in the room. He locked her inside and left with the keys. Next, he went to his son, Prince Will's room, and saw the boy still sleeping peacefully. Olabisi carefully picked him up, carried him to the car, and drove away, leaving Nena locked up in the house. Olabisi drove to his sister's house. When he arrived, he explained, "I have no one to properly take care of Prince Will right now. I would like him to stay here with you for a while, until I can hire a new nanny. Please help me," he pleaded. Bisola, his sister, noticing the unusual request, asked him curiously, "What happened to your other nanny? Why can't she take care of him?" "Well, I found out she was stealing money from me, so I had to sack her. I can't have a thief in my house," Olabisi lied. "And how about your new wife? Can't she take care of your child?" "Sister," Olabisi called out to her, "my wife is pregnant and she isn't feeling well. She's in the early stages of her pregnancy and I don't want to burden her anymore with Prince Will," Olabisi lied again. His sister felt sorry for him and agreed to take care of Prince Will. His sister's name is Bisola. She was yet to get married and she loved Prince Will as well. After the brief discussion, Olabisi's sister carried Prince into her room while he left hurriedly. He returned home and rushed straight to the bedroom. He unlocked the door and found Nena lying on the floor, still tied up but now asleep. He shook her awake and pulled her phone out of his pocket. "Here's your phone," he said coldly. "Now listen to me carefully. I'm going to call your parents and you will tell them that you went to visit your friend and that you won't be coming home tonight. If you fail to do exactly what I say, I will kill you right now and nobody will ever know what happened to you." Out of fear, Nena agreed to comply When Olabisi called her parents, she lied, telling them she was with a friend and would not be returning home that night. After the call ended, tears were streaming down her face. Nnenna began to question Olabisi as she wept.
Why? Why are you doing this to me? What have I done to deserve this? Why are you treating me as if I'm a thief? Look at how you tied me up. Is this fair? First, you wouldn't let me do business or continue my education. And now this. Why are you so mean to me? Is this why you married me?
You're more than a thief and you deserve to be treated like one. After all the money I've spent on your family, you think you can just leave me like that? Well, that is not going to happen. I will lock you in here and make sure you reap the harvest of your greed. After he said this, he stormed out of the room. Nnenna remained tied up in the room for 4 days, unable to bathe or care for herself. Every morning and night, Olabisi would bring her food and water and feed her himself. On the 5th day, Olabisi hired several bouncers to guard the house and instructed them not to let Nnenna escape under any circumstances. Then he untied her and said, "You are free to move around the house now, but don't get any ideas. There is no way you can escape." Nnenna was like a prisoner, trapped inside the house with no way to call for help, scream or communicate with anyone. 10 days had passed. Nnenna's parents were deeply worried. They had tried calling her repeatedly, but her number remained switched off. Their concern grew into fear, as Nnenna usually called them daily or visited often because of how their houses were close to each other. Realizing something was wrong, they decided to visit Olabisi's house once again to find out what had happened. When they arrived, the bouncers stopped them from entering the compound and sent them away as Olabisi had instructed them. It was then that Nnenna's parents realized that something must be definitely wrong. Terrified for their daughter's safety, the couple rushed to the nearest police station to file a missing persons report, naming Olabisi as the suspect. They demanded his immediate arrest so he could explain their daughter's whereabouts. Unknown to them that Olabisi was a man of influence with connections, the police accompanied Nnenna's parents to Olabisi's house. They demanded to see Olabisi and threatened to pull down the gate if they are denied entry. Olabisi, who was watching them from his balcony, calmly picked up his phone and called the commissioner of police, explaining that the officers from a specific division were attempting to arrest him. Within minutes, one of the officers received a call from the commissioner, ordering them to leave Olabisi's compound immediately. Nnenna's parents watched helplessly as the officers abandoned their mission, leaving their daughter's fate uncertain. The police officers turned to Nnenna's parents and said, "Please, Ma, sir, we received orders from above to retreat. This man can't be arrested, and there's nothing we can do about it. Our hands are tied. We can't disobey our superior." The officers left, leaving Nnenna's parents standing there, feeling disappointed and hopeless. Meanwhile, Nnenna, who had been watching from the window, felt hopeful at first. She was ready to scream for help as soon as the officers entered the house. However, her hope quickly turned to frustration as she saw the officers leaving after a brief phone call without arresting Olabisi. Nnenna's heart sank as she realized that her parents' effort had been in vain. She was filled with sadness and went back into her room, sat on the bed, and cried. While she was crying, a dark thought visited her mind. She decided that she would end everything that night. She was going to kill Olabisi in his sleep. She made up her mind and nothing would stop her from carrying out her plan. That night, Olabisi went to bed, feeling satisfied and unaware of the danger that awaited him. As soon as he fell asleep, Nnenna quietly sneaked out of her room, entered the kitchen. She grabbed a kitchen knife and silently entered Olabisi's room. She sneaked up to his bed, raised her hand and was about to stab him when suddenly Olabisi's phone rang, waking him up. He opened his eyes to see Nnenna holding a knife above him. He quickly grabbed her hand before she would bury the knife in his chest and they began to struggle over the knife. However, Olabisi's strength overwhelmed her, and he grabbed the knife from her and stabbed her 3 times in the abdomen. Nnenna collapsed to the floor with blood pouring out from her wounds. The pain was unbearable, and as she struggled to breathe, Olabisi stood and watched her, unable to do anything. He knew going to the hospital was not possible, so he stood and watched her until she finally gave up the ghost. Olabisi was terrified by what he had just done. He stood up and watched Nnenna's corpse, which was already turning cold, unsure of what to do next. He looked at his blood-covered hands and said to himself, "What have I done? How can I tell her parents that their only daughter is dead and that I killed her? Oh my God, I have to do something. They must never find out that I did this." With fear in his heart, Olabisi quickly ran downstairs and grabbed a shovel. Then he began digging a shallow grave at the back of his house. When he was done, he wrapped Nnenna's lifeless body in a cloth and buried her in the grave he had dug. He covered it up quickly and went back to bed, trying to act as though nothing had happened. That night, Nnenna's mother had a disturbing dream. In the dream, she saw her daughter lying beside a river with her hands and legs tied. As she ran towards her daughter to help her, she watched in horror as Olabisi pushed her daughter into the river. Nnenna struggled and drowned without anyone helping her. The nightmare left Nnenna's mother shaking and fearful that something terrible had happened to her daughter. She woke up screaming, and her scream woke up her husband. He asked her what she dreamt about, and she told her husband about the terrible dream she had about their daughter. That night, they were scared that something bad must have happened to Nnenna, and they couldn't sleep. As soon as the first rooster crowed in the morning, Nnenna's mother and father went to Olabisi's compound, shouting and yelling, demanding to see their daughter. "Olabisi, what have you done to my daughter? Give me my child. Give me back my only daughter. She's all I have, oh." But Olabisi's bouncers wouldn't let her continue yelling any further. They threw Nnenna's parents out of the compound, but Nnenna's mother persisted. She stood by the gate, banging on the gate, screaming and shouting. When the commotion was getting too much, one of the bouncers came out with a baton and tried to hit her, but she ran out in fear and fell into a drainage and hurt her leg. Her husband couldn't bear the humiliation they were facing at the hands of Olabisi any longer, so he decided to take the matter to court. He sued Olabisi to court, but on the day that the court was meant to sit, Olabisi bribed the judge and the case was adjourned. It continued to be adjourned for more than 8 months. Nnenna's father even sold the car Olabisi had bought for him few months back to raise money to pursue the case at court, but unfortunately, he used up the money on his lawyer. As this was going on, Nnenna's father lost his job and he no longer had the money to continue paying his lawyer and pursuing the case against Olabisi. As a result, the case was closed. Things became very hard for Nnenna's parents. They no longer had enough money to eat and they were unable to renew their rent. Olabisi seized the opportunity to evict them from his house, and Nnenna's parents became stranded. They had nowhere to go, so they decided to return to their village. They left without their daughter and they felt deeply disappointed with life. When Olabisi heard that they had left the city for the village, he was very excited. Now, he had his freedom again and there was no one to keep an eye on his actions. He had all the opportunity to do whatever he wanted without being questioned or suspected. Olabisi resumed his terrible lifestyle, sleeping around with young teenagers, as usual. A month later, Olabisi came across a beautiful girl named Becky. She was a 15-year-old girl and the daughter of a poor widow. Olabisi saw her while she was on her way to buy foodstuffs for dinner. He was driving in his luxurious Benz. He parked his car beside her and said, "Hello, sweet girl. May I know your name?" "Good evening, sir. My name is Becky." "Wow, you're such a beautiful girl. Has anyone told you that today? Becky smiled and looked away shyly. This was the first time a man with an expensive car had stopped to talk to her and admire her beauty. She was overwhelmed by the attention from Olabisi. She felt special in a way that she had never experienced before. His flattery and compliments about her beauty and the expensive car he was riding made her feel like she was the center of his world. For a young girl from a poor background, without a father figure, this felt like a dream come true. One of the romantic stories she had often watched in Nollywood movies about billionaires falling in love with a young village girl. But little did she know, it was far more than that. She responded excitedly to all the questions Olabisi asked her. Before Olabisi left, he brought out his complimentary card and handed it over to Becky. "Call me when you get home, fine girl," Olabisi told Becky. Then he gave her some money and drove away. Becky was so excited. She felt she had finally met a man who might save her poor mother and siblings. She was overjoyed. Her excitement led her to make a rash decision. That night, Becky took her mother's phone when she thought no one was watching and secretly called Olabisi. He reassured her with smooth words, convincing her that he deeply loves her and that what they share was something genuine. To Becky, it felt like love because she knew nothing about emotion, relationships, and men. But Olabisi knew exactly what he was doing. He was preying on her naivety. He told her to meet him at a hotel at noon the next day, a plan he had carefully set in motion to continue his disturbing cycle of pedophiling. Becky, thinking she was going to meet the love of her life, was filled with excitement and anticipation, not knowing that she was walking straight into a dangerous trap set by Olabisi, who had his own twisted intentions. He accepted to meet Olabisi at the hotel, and as soon as it was 11:30, she sneaked out of her mother's house to go see Olabisi, planning to return before 5 p.m., which was the time her mother often returns from the market. When she met Olabisi at the hotel, he convinced her the more that he loved her deeply and compelled her to willingly give him her virginity. After that day, whenever Olabisi wanted Becky, he would call her and ask her to meet him at the hotel, and this continued for a while. He continued keeping his affairs with Becky a secret, until one day, Becky became sick and her body began to change. It became clear to her that she was pregnant. She excitedly went to tell Olabisi the news, but to her greatest surprise, he became furious. "I thought you were a big girl. Why did you let that thing enter your stomach? I gave you money to buy drugs and other things to keep you clean and prevent pregnancy. So how did you end up pregnant? Well, you have to terminate that pregnancy. You can't father that useless child." "But I thought you said you loved me. Why are you denying the pregnancy? Why do you want me to abort it? The fact that I said I love you doesn't mean I want to make you my wife or have a child with you." Olabisi handed a large amount of money to Becky and asked her to terminate the pregnancy. Becky went home that day feeling scared and kept the secret from her mother. She decided to meet her best friend Aminat, who had previously had an abortion, and explained her situation to her. After listening to Becky, Aminat felt sorry for Becky and took her to a cheap quack doctor for the procedure. However, during the procedure, Becky experienced complications that caused her to lose a lot of blood. She went home after the abortion in pains. The pain became unbearable through the night, and tragically, she died from excessive bleeding. When Becky's mother entered Becky's room the next morning, she found Becky lifeless and her bed was soaked in her own blood. She rushed Becky to the hospital, and after an autopsy was carried out, Becky's mother was told the true cause of her daughter's death. When the mother heard what happened to her daughter, she was heartbroken and devastated. She called her only sister, Sisi, who was a judge. Sisi had been the one training Becky in school ever since Becky's father passed away. As soon as she heard of her niece's death, she was devastated. She had loved Becky so much and even planned to take her abroad for higher education. Sisi swore to get justice and seek revenge for her niece. She vowed to uncover the man responsible for Becky's death, so she began making inquiries and asked Becky's mother if she knew who had gotten Becky pregnant. Becky's mother had no idea who it was because her daughter never mentioned anyone. Becky's mother began to investigate, speaking to anyone who might have known something about Becky's recent life. She questioned Becky's friends, teachers, and even her neighbors, hoping to find any clue that could lead her to the identity of the man who was responsible for the pregnancy and the death of her daughter. Through her investigation, she eventually found out that Becky had secret meetings with Olabisi. She learned from Becky's classmates that Becky had been spending time with a wealthy man who had promised her a better life, but she didn't know who it was because none of them ever met him. 1 week after Becky was buried, Becky's mother decided to burn some of her belongings, including her clothes. As she was going through her bag, she lifted a piece of clothes and noticed a complimentary card fell out of Becky's dress. She picked it up and saw the name boldly written, Olabisi's Group of Companies. She was skeptical at first. When had her daughter started meeting big business associates? She thought to herself, Becky was just a young girl who hadn't even finished secondary school yet. What could she be possibly doing with such a complimentary card? That night, Becky's mother couldn't sleep as she kept staring at the card. She decided she was going to ask Becky's best friend, Aminat, if she knew who had given her daughter the card. Becky's mother was restless all through the night and couldn't wait for daybreak. The next morning, she went straight to Aminat's house. When she arrived, she found Aminat washing clothes. She then asked her, "My dear, how are you and your family?" "Nne, I found this complimentary card inside Becky's clothes last evening. Do you know who gave it to her?" Aminat was confused at first, but after taking a close look at the complimentary card, she replied, "Yes, ma. Your daughter told me months ago that she had finally found love with a man who was very rich and he had promised to marry her. Becky then started visiting him frequently at a hotel, but she got pregnant and the man rejected the pregnancy, telling her to abort it." Becky's mom was heartbroken, hearing what had happened to her daughter and how everything had begun. "My dear, please, do you know the name of the hotel where she visited the man who got her pregnant?" "Yes, ma. I know the name of the hotel. It's called St. Crown's Hotel along Kubwa Street. By the left, the hotel is brown and white. That's the color of the building." However, Aminat didn't tell Becky's mother that she was the one who took Becky to the quack doctor that caused her death. "Thank you, my dear. I will take my leave now. Continue what you're doing," Becky's mother said and left. As soon as Becky's mom got home, she called her sister, Sisi. Sisi told Becky's mom that the complimentary card and the hotel name were enough details to track down Olabisi. Sisi told her that she would be joining the next morning flight to come down to Lagos, and as she promised, she arrived the state the next morning. Then she went to see Aminat as soon as possible. But Sisi could tell that Aminat was scared and she knew that Aminat had something to hide. So she threatened to arrest Aminat and send her to jail if she didn't confess and tell her all that happened. Out of fear, Aminat confessed and told them she was the one who showed Becky where to do the abortion. Becky's mother, upon hearing Aminat's words, felt a sharp pain in her chest. The revelation shattered her heart. Her daughter, in her innocence, had been lured into the world of manipulation and deceit by a man who had promised her love but left her to deal with the consequences alone. Aminat's confession confirmed everything. Becky had been seeing Olabisi, and he had not only betrayed her trust but had driven her to a point where she felt she had no choice but to terminate the pregnancy, something that led to her tragic death. Becky's mother, overwhelmed with grief and anger, knew she had to act. She had to confront Olabisi and demand justice for her daughter. But she also realized that the man she was dealing with was powerful, and confronting him alone might not be enough. Sisi began preparing to bring Olabisi to justice, using her position as a judge to press for an investigation and, if necessary, the prosecution of Olabisi for his role in Becky's death. She vowed that no matter what it took, she would uncover the truth and hold Olabisi accountable for his actions, no matter how powerful or influential he might be. The next morning, Sisi told Becky's mother, "Sister, it is so unfortunate that we lost Becky because of a stupid strange man. But I will show him what I am made of. I will teach him a lesson he would never forget, so that when he sees a young teenager again, he will never come close to them. First and foremost, we need to make an entry at the police station, then get some police officers to follow us to the hotel. We need to trace his whereabouts. If the number on the card matches with the number of the hotel where he's staying while sleeping with Becky, this will help us confirm if he's truly the one." They left home that morning to make an entry at the police station, and they left with some policemen to the hotel. When they got to the hotel, they asked for Olabisi's information and records. These were checked, including the hotel's CCTV footage, which was how Olabisi was identified. They even saw a clip of Olabisi walking out of the hotel with Becky. The police took screenshots of this and used the pictures as evidence. One of the policemen, who knew Olabisi very well, said to them, "Madam, I would advise you to forfeit this case because this man can't be arrested. So many people have tried to arrest him, but they could not because he has powerful connections around the city." Sisi smiled at what the policeman said and replied, "Then watch me take this man down. If he has always gone scot-free with his crimes, this time around, he has met his doom." They all went back together to the police station as Sisi showed the evidence she had gotten from the hotels, including the pictures of Olabisi and Becky, to the DPO, insisting that they should give an arrest warrant for Olabisi. But the DPO refused, saying that the evidence was not enough to arrest a high-profile personality like Olabisi. Out of anger, Sisi told him, "It is not in your power to decide that. It is the duty of the court. Now do your job immediately, because one call to Abuja will make you lose your job this minute and ruin your entire life. It's obvious that you don't know who you're talking to." Out of anger, the DPO stood up and screamed at her, "Madam, who are you to tell me what to do in my office? Who are you to tell me how to do my job? You must be insane. Now leave my office." Sisi dipped her hand into her handbag and brought out her ID card and showed it to him. "I am one of the chief judges at the Federal High Court in Abuja. Now do what I ask you to do or lose your job." DPO became very shocked. He started pleading with Madam Sisi, saying, "I'm sorry, ma. I'm sorry. I will send out my boys immediately for the arrest." Meanwhile, Olabisi was sitting in his living room watching the news when he had a knock on his door. He opened it only to find some policemen with unfamiliar faces he had never seen before. He had fired his bouncers because he no longer needed their services after the death of Nenna. "You are under arrest for the murder of one Miss Becky." Hearing Becky's name sent a cold shiver down Olabisi's spine. But then he told himself, "Why should I be scared when I have connections?" He quickly picked up his phone to call the DPO, but the DPO told him that the matter was out of his hands. "Wait, DPO! DPO!" Olabisi kept stammering, but the DPO hung up on him. Olabisi was arrested and detained. He was charged to court, and the news of his arrest spread across the city like wildfire. Nenna's parents also heard the news of Olabisi's arrest. They were relieved and happy. With the help of their family members, they raised enough money to reopen the closed case concerning their missing daughter, Nenna, who had been missing for the past 1 year and 6 months, and a search warrant was issued by the court to search Olabisi's house and see if there was any clue regarding Nenna's whereabouts. The police arrived at Olabisi's house and began searching every nook and cranny of his house. During the search, they came across an uneven patch of the ground at the back of his house. The area was untidy and looked abandoned. One of the officers wondered why the ground was uneven and unkempt, thinking that perhaps it was where Olabisi hid his money. So he got 2 shovels and began digging with another officer. After digging for a few minutes, they unearthed a piece of fabric. The 2 officers turned to each other in surprise, thinking that they had found a gold mine. With determination and anticipation, they continued digging, but faster this time. As they dug deeper, they eventually unearthed a bone and a human skeletal structure. The officers screamed, almost running away in shock. They took a report of what they had discovered and presented it to the court. The skeletal structure was properly examined, and it was concluded that it was the corpse of Nnenna. When Nnenna's parents heard the news, her mother collapsed to the ground in tears, blaming herself for allowing her daughter get married to Olabisi, despite the fact that they knew he was a cruel woman beater. It was then that they realized why they had not heard from Nnenna in all those years. They mourned their daughter and buried her bones properly in her father's compound. Meanwhile, Olabisi was prosecuted in court. Sisi presented all the evidence they gathered against Olabisi, including the crimes he had committed against young girls he had used and discarded in the past. Some of these girls had died during the abortions he forced them to undergo, while most of them had lost their wombs. His wife, Mary, also showed up in court to testify against him. The judge showed no mercy, and Olabisi was sentenced to death by hanging. The following month, Olabisi was hanged, and that was how he met his end. The evil he often sown had completely caught up with him. Olabisi's sister returned Prince Will to his mother, apologizing for all the pain Olabisi had caused her. Mary regained control of the family business, and with determination she rebuilt her life. She married a man who loved and respected her deeply, and together they had 3 more children. Mary also made it a tradition to send a monthly allowance to all the families affected by Olabisi's crimes, offering them support and solace. In the end, they all found peace and happiness. The story of Becky served as a cautionary tale for young girls, reminding them to be cautious and aware of the dangers of being naive, and the tragic death of Nnenna became a warning to parents, teaching them the importance of not compromising their children's future for money or selfish gain. And so, despite all the pain, there was healing and life went on. The memory of the victims lived on as a reminder for the need for love, respect, and justice in every family. The moral lesson of this story reminds us that respect for others' dignity is essential. Exploiting young, vulnerable individuals is wrong and can lead to tragic consequences. No matter how powerful someone may seem, justice will eventually prevail, and those who commit evil will face the consequences. People who exploit and manipulate others can cause irreversible harm, and we must be cautious of such individuals, especially when they hide behind false promises. It is vital to seek justice for those who cannot stand up for themselves, whether it is a young girl or a victim of abuse. Domestic violence, whether physical or emotional, can be deadly and must not be tolerated in any form. Power and corruption do not last forever. Those who abuse their position of power will eventually be held accountable for their actions. Thank you for watching our video. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like and share. Thank you.